Okay, so Machikane FM, today we are at the Stanford University to interview Dr. Gary Mukai. He's the director of the Stanford University Stanford Program of International and Cross-Cultural Education, known as SPICE. Thank you so much for participating in this program.
It's my pleasure to meet with you.
Perfect.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, no, thank you so much. So let's a little bit talk about the SPICE. Could you tell us a little bit about SPICE?
Sure. The Stanford Program on International and Cross-Cultural Education, or SPICE, began in 1976.
Okay, wow.
However, its origins date back to 1973 with a program that focused on China. And this was shortly after President Nixon's historic trip to China. And Stanford scholars decided to create a program that would help to upgrade the teaching about China in schools in the Bay Area.
Okay.
So elementary and high schools specifically. And they worked in two areas. The development of supplementary curriculum materials on China and U.S.-China relations, and teacher professional development. And in 1976, other projects were added to the project on China, such as the Japan project, the Africa project, Latin America project, and the term SPICE was created to sort of be the umbrella term for these various country or region-specific projects. So our project on Japan has, been very active since 1976. And last year we celebrated SPICE's 40th anniversary. Since 1976, SPICE has had projects on Japan that are curricular focused, teacher professional development programs on Japan and U.S.-Japan relations. And we also have, as you know, online courses on Japan, specifically for students in the United States, and courses on U.S. society and culture and U.S.-Japan relations for students in Japan. So now SPICE works in three areas: curriculum development, teacher professional development, and online teaching.
Oh, perfect. And then so the other day, actually on Friday, the August 11th, Osaka University, the North American Center, was invited to attend the 2017 Japan Day event. Thank you again for inviting us. And at the event, we were there to witness the students, top students from the Stanford E-Japan program, and also top students from the Leisure Scholar program. Could you tell us a little bit about the program and then maybe a little bit about the Japan Day at Stanford?
Sure. So, Yu-san, I really appreciated your attendance. And it was also great to see Hasegawa sensei. So on Japan Day, as you mentioned, we honored the top students in several cohorts. We offer Stanford E-Japan twice a year. So we honored students, the top two students in each cohort from fall of 2016 and spring of 2016. And we offer the Reischauer Scholars Program once a year. So we honored 3 students from the 2017 Reischauer Scholars Program cohort. The idea of creating a program to honor the top students arose quite some time ago. Actually, not too long after the establishment of the Reischauer Scholars Program in 2002. we decided that perhaps some sort of award ceremony would be a good stimulus and good motivator for students to try really hard.
Yeah.
And in fact, that has proven to be true. Students become very motivated when they hear that there is this opportunity. And so when we started Stanford E-Japan, which is the program for high school students in Japan,
Yes.
we decided to honor top students in those cohorts as well. So they fly to California, as you know, and they have the opportunity on Japan Day to give presentations based on their research, but also to listen to distinguished guests, such as this year, Consul General Jun Yamada from the Consulate General of Japan in San Francisco. They also had the chance to talk to former U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Michael Armacost. So we feel that Japan Day has been successful for many reasons, and it's something that we hope to continue into the future. And we want to invite you and the other staff at the Osaka University Center to future Japan Day events. We try to engage the broader Japanese community in the Bay Area, and also, of course, organizations like the Japan Society that are working very closely with Japan.
Let's go back to the Osaka University D-Learning. Last year, thank you again for coming to give a lecture. It was great. I really enjoyed your lecture. And then, so your lecture was about the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack and the Japanese-American experience during World War II. Could you tell us a little bit why you picked the topic last year to give a lecture to Osaka University students?
Well, when I was invited to give a talk, I considered various topics. However, the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack was very much in the news. And both in Japan and in the United States. So I decided to focus on that topic primarily because of that. I think it's useful sometimes to introduce students to the historical context of events or anniversaries such as that. So that's why I chose it. And during my lecture, and in listening to students' comments and questions, I became increasingly convinced that that in fact was perhaps a good choice. And because the topic is so widely discussed and taught about in both countries, it's an iconic event, right? Similar to the atomic bombings in Japan. Both events are covered in our textbooks, for example. So I think that was another reason why I decided to choose the topics, because there was some familiarity among the students. But I wasn't sure about how much historical context they had. And I wasn't sure also about to what degree they were aware of this seminal event and its impact on Japanese and Japanese Americans residing in the United States and territories like Hawaii, which wasn't a state, of course, at the time. And as you know, I shared many visuals, and it was very gratifying for me that many of these visuals and perhaps some of the comments that I made triggered reactions, questions, comments from the students at Osaka University. And I have to say, I was really impressed with the students.
Great.
And I really wanted to meet them in person rather than
just
in addition to sort of the virtual classroom experience I was experiencing. My family was, as I mentioned in my lecture, deeply impacted by the Pearl Harbor attack because 3 of my grandparents were born in Hiroshima. And one of my grandmothers was born on the Big Island of Hawaii, but at a young age went to Hiroshima with her parents or my great-grandparents. So in the early 20th century, all of my grandparents came to either Hawaii or to the mainland. They were here and had children prior to the Pearl Harbor attack. And most of my family was impacted by the Executive Order 9066. And most spent the war years in Arizona, in Poston, one of the so-called relocation centers. There are various names given to these camps. So reflecting upon the lecture that I gave to the Osaka University students, as I was talking about my family's experience, it was sort of another reason why I was glad that I chose the topic, because they seemed to be interested in the fact that this experience deeply impacted my family. I wasn't alive at the time, but indirectly affected me. Because when I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, there was still a lot of misunderstanding about World War II related issues, including Pearl Harbor attack and so-called Japanese American internment. I also recall sharing with your students that because my ancestral hometown is Hiroshima, my Japanese relatives there were deeply impacted by World War II as well, specifically the atomic bombing. So in my family, many people died. Some survived as atomic bomb survivors, so-called hibakusha. Among the hibakusha were some Japanese Americans, Nisei. And I think that's an important lesson for students in both countries to know about. Our countries are very interdependent. Obviously, economically, politically, in terms of defense, but also socially, through families such as mine. We have family in both countries. So when Japan and the US went to war, the ripple effect, was tremendous and created a lot of conflict. So my grandparents, 3 of them were Japanese citizens who couldn't become American citizens by law until 1952. Then my grandmother, who was born in the Big Island, she had dual citizenship. but all of their children who were born here were U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm.
So within one household, you had
Wow.
Japanese nationals and Americans, right?
Mm-hmm.
This creates a lot of conflict
Mm-hmm.
when the U.S. and Japan went to war.
Mm.
This is something I think that high school students and university students should critically think about.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to reiterate that the Osaka University students were really impressive. And, I hope I have another chance to meet with them, either virtually or in person.
In person. Yeah, I think that your lecture last year for the Osaka University, that is actually one of the reasons we decided to do another episode with Mr. Joseph Yasutake from Japanese American Museum in San Jose.
Mm.
I think we, younger generation, we know the history, but we don't know at the personal level. So that was really important for the students and for me to listen to the history from personal level. And then it makes me think, and especially right now, I think it is important to learn from the history and then how the society can control how you personally feel. So I think at the personal level, everybody needs to think with their mind.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the term empathy is really critical right now. And it's always been sort of an underlying foundational concept of what we do at SPICE, right? So we're trying to build greater cross-cultural international understanding, especially through youth, though we work with teachers as well, who are, of course, our bridge to their students. But sometimes we do have an opportunity in the case of the Reischauer Scholars Program and Stanford Japan to work directly with students. And so when Dr. Yasutake speaks to teachers here at SPICE, that is for our teacher professional development seminars, the teachers are riveted to his story because he lived through that experience. So I commend you for taking the time to interview him. And it makes me happy to think that my lecture inspired you in part to approach someone like that. Sometimes we've invited to our teacher professional development seminars survivors of the atomic bombing of either Hiroshima or Nagasaki to talk with teachers. Some are Americans of Japanese descent who happened to be in Hiroshima prior to the Pearl Harbor attack and were living there at the time of the atomic bombing. The teachers' reactions are, very powerful. It's a very emotional experience to be in the presence of survivors. And that sort of first-hand account, first-hand narrative, for Joe Yasutake to show his photograph when he was a little boy is very powerful, right? That seems to have a profound impact on people in general. Not just teachers, not just young students, but people in general. So I think it's great that in your courses that you offer, you welcome speakers to share their personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think those have a profound impact
Mm-hmm.
on students on either side of the
Mm-hmm.
Pacific.
Yeah, Osaka University always try for this distance learning classes to try to get different perspective from different teachers. So it was great to have you. And going back to the story that you wanted to meet the students at Osaka University face to face, I've heard that you actually were at Osaka University in June. Is that right?
Yes, I was in touch since your course with Iwai Sensei and Oyama Sensei. And as you know, with some of the former directors of your office, Kuboi Sensei and Kabasawa Sensei. And they invited me to visit Osaka University. And one of the scholars prepared a incredible meal.
Meal? Oh, meal.
Lunch.
Lunch.
It was so good.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was so good. And it was sort of this Western African, I believe, inspired meal, but it was like really great.
Oh, good.
And I don't think you can find that anywhere. So anyway, I was invited to this luncheon, and most of the people at the luncheon were instructors, professors. But there were I believe there were two students, at least two students who were there, and I had the opportunity to talk to them. And one of them has spent a significant amount of time here in the Bay Area. And I encouraged the students to, try to come to Stanford for graduate studies or maybe postdoctoral studies or something like that. So, since I joined SPICE in 1988, perhaps before you were born, I've had many opportunities to visit Japan, meet with many students at various levels. But that visit to Osaka University is among my most memorable. Oh. And not just because of the food, which was incredible, but because I was so touched by the discussions, the openness of discussion, not only from the faculty, but also from the students, the one-on-one discussions that I had with people. And there were also foreign instructors, so non-Japanese instructors there as well. And that added to the richness of the discussions. It's great to see at prestigious universities like Osaka University that there's an openness to bringing in foreign faculty to work with students. You mentioned perspective earlier, and they can bring some unique perspectives, right, to the students, as well as perhaps different pedagogical strategies, different teaching methods, for example, which could engage students in different ways, right? From traditional ways that have been used in Japan. So whenever I go to Japan, I enjoy those types of experiences, but I also learn a tremendous amount when I observe Japanese instructors giving classes, because I'm quite intrigued by pedagogy. So it's one of my interests. What are effective ways of interactively engaging students is something that is part of my heartbeat. And I think that interest, dates back to when I first went to Japan to teach in 1977.
1977.
And I know you weren't born then. So, when I first went to teach in Japan, I not only had the chance to give my own classes, but also to co-teach, or in some cases, sort of to be an observer in classrooms. And so I learned a lot during my very youthful years.
Were you teaching English? I forgot.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So this year marks my 40th year since I went to go to teach English in Japan.
Oh, wow.
It was in Gunma. So you look shocked.
No. It's like 40 years ago. That's yeah. I can imagine. But
there was no, like internet, obviously.
More like face to face.
Yes. And in fact, when we made copies for students, we had to use this kind of machine.
What?
By hand to make
really?
copies, yes.
I don't know what that is.
See how old I am?
I know.
And however, in some ways, life was easier.
Yeah.
There was no email. So, to write home to California, I was forced to write letters, right? And that was harder actually to do, but it was simpler in that there wasn't this constant sort of inclination to always check email, right? Because it didn't exist.
You're always connected to something,
right?
Yeah,
right.
You cannot escape.
And to have the opportunity that I had with Osaka University last year to teach Osaka University students is just incredible, because I could have never imagined something like that 40 years ago. That said, there's something really special about physical face-to-face gatherings, which is why I really enjoyed spending some time at Ritsumeikan and at Osaka University, in June. So, yeah, I mean, I hope I have more of those opportunities.
Yeah, I believe you are coming back this year to give a lecture was it in November? I don't remember that day, but you are coming back to the Osaka University for the distance
awesome.
learning. Yeah, 2017
great.
fall. So,
that makes me happy.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Like you said, it's really great to have this opportunity to be able to give a lecture from United States to the students in Japan. But like you said, it's really important to have the face-to-face opportunities. So I hope you're gonna have another visit to Osaka University, maybe with the Dr. Iwai and Dr. Oyama, like we can figure out something.
Yes. During that class and during my visit to Osaka University, it crossed my mind to try to grow that class in other ways. In other words, can we reach more students? Can we teach more classes? One of the challenges, of course, is the time difference.
Yes.
Right? But, I think I met with them at 6 p.m. here.
Yes, I believe so.
Right. And so it was morning time.
In the morning time, yeah.
In Japan, which worked out. So it's fine in the case of, classes that are taught during the regular school day. In the case of Stanford Japan, the class obviously isn't taught. It cannot be taught during the regular school day because we have students from throughout the country. So these students can't just leave their classrooms, right, for our course. So it's taught in the evenings here, about 9 p.m. and 1 p.m. in Japan time on Saturday.
Wow.
So that's challenging. So sometimes, it's hard to get a speaker for Waka because it's 9 p.m. on Friday.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And people are, very busy usually. But if we were to offer other courses for Osaka University during the sort of regular school day, I think it's really something that we should explore. So perhaps we could discuss that someday.
Yeah, someday. And then if you have any message for Osaka University students or any students who are in Japan and then thinking about going to abroad, do you have any message like what is the importance of doing that?
Well, thank you for that question. Before I answer that question, I'd like to say that I attended the Japan Exchange and Teaching reunion. It was called JET 30 reunion. So this year marks the 30th anniversary of JET.
Oh, really?
Right?
Okay.
And as you know, Americans and young people from other countries go to Japan to either teach language or to work as coordinator of international relations. So a greater effort is being made on the part of JET to reach even increasing numbers of elementary school students. Programs, JET assistant language teachers are very much strongly in place at middle schools and high schools in Japan, primarily at public schools. But they're growing the numbers at elementary schools. So students are being exposed to, in the case of Americans who go to Japan, English instruction from a young age. So in terms of encouraging students to come to the United States, I absolutely encourage them to do that. I would love to see more Japanese coming to the United States to study or to work in places like Silicon Valley. So one thing I would say is for them to really take their English language study seriously. And there are programs like JET that help to make sure that this happens, right? The other thing that I'm inspired by in Japan is the so-called Global 30, this initiative sponsored by the government to encourage Japanese universities to become more global, such as Osaka University, as well as something I mentioned earlier, super global high schools, right? Encouraging high schools to become more global. And part of this involves, having students leave Japan to spend some time in places like the United States, either as college students or as high school students. I think that's fantastic. I encourage students to not only take their English studies seriously, that is for students who aspire to come to the United States, but to also study about U.S. society and culture before coming. Sometimes I have the chance to meet with Japanese corporate people who come to Silicon Valley who have strong English skills, but they haven't really been exposed much at all to, not in every case, of course, to corporate culture, the Silicon Valley ecosystem. And that's really important. So many are surprised, for example, to walk into a company, an large international company, to see that it's extremely diverse with people from all over the world, right? So not only Americans, but people from all over the world were in the workforce. That's important for Japanese people to know. You know, I also think that youth in Japan who live in, all of the prefectures to really think seriously about spending time abroad. Usually, when I meet students from Japan, they are from some of the bigger cities, right? This seems to be fairly commonplace. I wish more would come from these bigger cities, but also from, smaller towns and prefectures like where I used to live in Gunma, which has large. Of course, they have very large cities too, but they also have very large rural areas. I would love to see the knowledge they gain abroad being brought back to all parts of Japan, because I know that Japan is grappling with the issue of prefectures losing people, right? Not only to larger cities like Tokyo and Osaka, for understandable reasons, schooling, employment, right? There are lots of opportunities. But I would love to see students from rural areas, for example, or more rural prefectures spend time in the United States, bring back what they learn, and grow opportunities within their rural areas or their prefectures broadly. I would love to see that. In fact, one of the outgrowths of Stanford eJapan was the creation of a course only for students and high school students in Tottori Prefecture. This was sponsored by the Prefectural Board of Education in Tottori and driven by the vision of Governor Hirai. And, we're fortunate to offer this course to high school students in Tottori. And I think Tottori is an example of a more rural,
trying to reach out.
Yes, a more rural prefecture. Gosh, it's so beautiful there. I had the opportunity to go for the first time last year. And my colleague who teaches the course, Jonas Edman, had the opportunity to go recently. And, we want to empower these students with opportunities to learn more about the U.S. We want them to come to the U.S. to spend some time here. And we also want them to go back eventually to Tottori. Say, if they go to Osaka to study or to come to the United States for studies or work, we would like them to think seriously about bringing this wealth of knowledge back to Tottori. Because I would like to see, more opportunities for youth in prefectures like Tottori. It was just a special experience that I'll never forget.
Oh, that's great.
Not only going to like the sand dunes,
it's
which was really great, very, very, very beautiful, and I know very popular tourist site. But the invaluable part for me was to meet with young students and to know that there's just so much potential there. So perhaps you know about banyan trees. So there are these famous banyan trees in Hawaii, for example.
Oh, yes.
So you have a big tree, and then the limbs go down and they root themselves, and another tree grows. So Stanford eJapan, I hope to see it as a program like that, that it'll inspire different regions of Japan
Mm-hmm.
or specific prefectures or cities or schools to become engaged
Mm-hmm.
with the United States. So the original idea, the original banyan tree,
Uh-huh.
kind of is symbolized. The original Stanford Japan program is sort of symbolized by the main banyan tree.
Oh.
And they're outgrowths of it.
Just
like Stanford Totori is kind of a new tree that was created from one of the branches from this Stanford Japan. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Maybe that's not such a good analogy, but so that's kind of how I envision this program. But just to reinforce my point, we really want to reach all parts of Japan, from Hokkaido to Okinawa. And technology can afford this opportunity. Afford us this opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great message for those people who wanted to come to abroad to study the language first, and also get to know the culture. So when you go over there, it will be a little bit easier to adapt as well.
Yes, I was just reminded on Japan Day we had a student from Mie Prefecture.
Right? Yeah, I remember. She's the one who hasn't been outside of Japan or something.
She hasn't spent. I'm not sure if she had ever traveled.
Or maybe she's
abroad,
been,
but she hasn't spent a lot of time abroad. But there's an example of someone whom I hope was sort of empowered by that opportunity here, even though it was a short time. I believe she was very happy to be here. And, I hope that this enthusiasm I hope she'll bring back to Mie, to her school, her community, and to Mie Prefecture, to encourage other students to take advantage of those types of opportunities, to sign up, to apply for Stanford Japan, but other programs like it. So in Mie, at the super global high schools there, right? I hope that these schools really, continue to take seriously, the opportunity to empower some of their students, with chances to go abroad. So that's I think that's something I hope will grow into the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking your time. I'm looking forward to seeing you 2017 fall semester at Osaka University North American Center. Thank you for coming today. Sorry. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, sorry.
And it was really an honor to talk with you today. Thank you for this opportunity. And, I'm really happy that you're my friend.
Thank you. I'm happy too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.